raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, the time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome, American patriots, to another episode of the Raising Cain Show. This was kind of a special show that I put together last minute with my friend Jack Dona, and I really wanted to have him on the show because this issue of cover-ups and, you know, government cover-ups, intelligence agency cover-ups, this is nothing new. And right now, it's all over the media. Everybody's talking about it, and I felt like this would be a good show to talk about these issues. And of course, I'm talking about the Epstein files, the Epstein list, the decision by the DOJ to basically, you know, put a can on it, and kind of Trump's reaction, but also to go through and look at a little bit of history. So I want to thank everybody for joining today. We're not going to do commercials. You know, like I said, this is kind of a special show. And so I want to thank you, Jack, for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Nate. You know, you're a champion of truth and justice in the American way. You know, I mean, and you're still one of the very few that are in the vertical position that took on Hillary Clinton. You know, I mean, that whole I still remember that uranium one thing. You know, and I said that this guy better have good security or he's a dead man. But
yeah, I got the best security.
I'm
do. Certain that the only reason I'm alive is because God ain't done with me yet. There's so many miraculous things that happened that, you know, kind of, you know, where I could have gone the other direction, but, you know, God, I think, kept me safe. And, you know, and that, so maybe that's a good kind of place to start, right?
Yep, that's why I brought it up.
We think so many people have looked to Trump, you know, as the savior of our country. And to kind of start and preface this, I love Trump as our president. He's the best president that I've seen in my lifetime. That doesn't mean that he is flawless. In fact, he's a human being. And there are things that we've seen recently and things I've seen in the past too, you know, that concerned me. But this thing recently with the Epstein list and kind of his reaction to it, in one sense, it surprises me, but in another, it doesn't, because he is, you know, that he's going to be, this will be his second term, and there's, you know, no running again for him. So he can pretty much do what he wants. And he knows, you know, that doesn't matter, you know, in the short term. In the long term, it does, because it can damage, you know, the Republican Party and their chances. It also could, you know, cause some damage in the midterms. But I think Trump's counting on, you know, his actions to try to improve the lives of Americans to get people to the polls. And I think that's why he's kind of being flippant about, you know, a lot of people's reactions. But I don't know that he sees, you know, what it's done to his base. And I don't know that, you know, because he without a doubt, he lives in a bubble, right? You know, he's the president of the United States. He's surrounded by advisors. He doesn't get out and, you know, probably see and talk to people that are not, you know, telling him what he wants to hear. So I think that has a lot to do, you know, with why we're seeing kind of the reaction that we're seeing now. But anyways, I want to kind of turn it over to you and get your thoughts on, like, when you first saw the reaction by the DOJ, that they were saying there's no there there, that this is just a, there's no list, there's no blackmail going on. Jeffrey Epstein, did kill himself.
Mhm.
What started going through your mind?
Well, the first thing that I want to tell you is, and I want to comment on is you hit it. They hit the nail on the head before we started the show. There's a lot of people that uh, I don't want to use the word cult followers, but our founding fathers were very, very clear about one thing. It is not only our right, but it is our duty to question government at all levels, because
Absolutely.
we are the people that give consent to be governed. Okay, I think Frederick Bastiat kind of summed it up best, in his treatise on the law, that basically whatever is illegal for a citizen to do should also be illegal for the government to do. But what we're
Yeah.
seeing here is we're seeing that there's a double standard here. Now, as far as the whole issue of Epstein and the FBI now disclaiming that there's nothing there, and Trump saying it's a hoax, and so on and so on. It doesn't fly. It absolutely doesn't
Yeah.
fly. And the reason why it doesn't fly is because all you have to do is look back on their own words. I mean,
Yeah.
there's videotapes out there of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Donald Trump Jr., every single one of them talking about the Epstein client list and how the only two people that have ever been prosecuted and convicted for what transpired, presumably at the either on the Lolita Express, is what they call it, the plane, or on the island, was done by Epstein, and that there was some type of nefarious possibly blackmail involved. And so
Yeah.
it's their own words. Even the president himself. There was recently ABC just did they did a montage of all of his
Yep.
clips where he's saying these things. Now,
Yeah.
I had a discussion with Colonel Don Jenkins. He's my old battalion commander. He's also wing commander for J-Stars at Warner Robins, and we maintain close friendship. We've been friends for many, many years, and we were going to do an article about it, but then we kind of saw everything coming out, and it was kind of ad nauseum. It's like it's kind of moot. But
Yeah.
there's some few points that show that there is a there in
Yeah.
regards to Jeffrey Epstein, and we can go into the details behind it. But in a nutshell, we came up with it. It's one of three things. Scenario one, it is a hoax. They overplayed it. They made a mistake, in which case the correct solution is you come forward and you say, hey, we made a mistake. We apologize. We shouldn't have been campaigning on this. We shouldn't have been harping on this and hyping on this up. Okay. Then there's scenario two. Scenario two is where Epstein actually was some type of a agent, whether he was an agent of one of the intelligence services of our country, or he was an agent of the intelligence services of a foreign country. And so therefore, if you look at this in the second and third order magnitude effects, if everything is revealed, and we're talking about sources and methods. If everything is revealed, it could at the very, very worst case scenario, what it could do is it could turn all of the Five Eyes, if they're involved, all of the Western powers, all the intelligence services that have a trust with the United States, to break from us and turn on Israel, which would by consequence monkey wrench the Abraham Accords.
Everything he's trying to do. Yeah.
The Abraham. The third scenario, I think, Nate, is that there is something in there about Trump or someone very close to him. And basically he's willing to, I'm not, like you said, I'm not running again. I'm willing to fall on my sword on this, but I'm just not going to reveal it. And so
that is basically the exact same sentiment that I came to, that those three scenarios. Now, the first scenario that this is actually is a hoax and that they overplayed it, I don't accept that is that. I think that's the least likely of the three. And the reason I say that is because, you know, when I first heard this come out, I was shocked, but I also wasn't. I've said for a long time that I don't think there will be justice when it comes to this or a lot of the crimes that have gone on by the elites.
Yeah.
They are way too powerful, and there's a cost for going after them. And Trump could either spend the next 4 years going after them, alienating probably a lot of the people in power that he needs in order to get things done, and have a very unsuccessful presidency, or he could basically just brush stuff under the rug, you know, with the hopes of being able to accomplish stuff in his presidency. And I think that's probably what's going on. Now, the reason I say that, I find that the what they're saying as truth being the least likely. When I first heard this, I had to kind of like take a double take and say, okay, wait a minute. Did we all overplay this? Did I overplay this? I'm very careful about looking at my sources, looking at the facts, considering, you know, I've got experience working in the DOJ. I was an FBI whistleblower that blew the whistle on an FBI cover-up, a DOJ cover-up.
Yep.
So I have a little bit of experience in seeing and knowing that cover-ups do happen, even very widely investigated ones. I mean, in the case of the Hillary Clinton scandal, there were three different field offices that were investigating her, multiple agents involved. Not one of them leaked anything. I was the only one, and I was just a contractor, not even involved in the investigations, but overheard a conversation that led me to look into it. And then I walked out with classified documents in order to blow the whistle, and went, you know, I didn't go to the press. I went to the IG. I went to the House and Senate Intel committees, which was the appropriate thing to do. It's probably the reason why they never brought charges against me, why I was never put in jail, but they certainly made my life a living hell. And so I do come with a little bit of bias. You know, I'll be the first to admit that. I have been, you know, and by the way, a lot of people don't realize this, but when I was raided wrongfully, I believe, by the FBI, when I was spied on wrongfully by the FBI, when they, I believe, utilized, you know, and this is, you know, my allegation, I believe they used FISA to spy on me, Section 702, and maybe even worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that all happened under Trump's presidency. Trump was president when all that happened. Now, I gave him the benefit of the doubt because, honestly, I don't believe Trump had any control over the FBI or the Department of Justice. You know, I think Department of Justice, AG Barr was actually, I think, really working against Trump secretly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and in fact, that he was a former CIA guy, I think just makes matters worse, and, you know, leads me to have less trust in him. But I think that the FBI, he clearly had no control over. And so,
or the DOJ.
Yeah, or the DOJ. And so I would say that in Trump's first presidency, I gave him a pass on that.
Mm-hmm.
This is a different DOJ. This is a different FBI. I can't give him a pass on this. And here's the thing. I started going back because I was thinking, okay, did I miss something? Did I get this wrong?
No, you know what's bothering you is your gut. They're acting like they're guilty, based upon what we know.
You're absolutely right.
They're acting like they're guilty. Yep.
I went back and I looked. I did some research, and I want to read some of these comments. So the list of names that I have here are several victims who testified against Ghislaine Maxwell in the 2021 federal trial.
Mm-hmm.
And much of their testimony has been released, and you can go and verify. And this is testimony that is given under oath. Now, the difference between somebody, you know, he said, she said, that is, somebody, some talking head on social media or on the news, that's one thing. I take that with, very, very much a grain of salt, because there's no consequences for them lying. But when somebody lies under oath, they can go to jail. And so I take that a lot more serious. And then if they testify and the person they're testifying against is convicted and goes to prison, then I really take very seriously what they said, because clearly the jury saw evidence and things that we didn't see, and it lined up with what was being testified to. So I want to start with just one name, and that's Carolyn Andriano. So she testified as Carolyn. Her testimony was against Maxwell in 2021 case. She alleged that Maxwell groomed and evaluated her at age 14 for Epstein and his friends, implying that she was being prepped to be shared with powerful associates in Epstein's circle. She was paid for massages that turned sexual, and she was basically, groomed into becoming a recruiter herself and going and finding other girls. I'm not going to read the quotes from her because they're pretty graphic and it's unnecessary. So I'm just kind of giving the highlights on it. Virginia Giuffre, probably the one that most people have heard of, formerly Virginia Roberts. She came out publicly, sued Maxwell for defamation, settled in 2017. She was a key figure listed in the Epstein docs. She alleged trafficking in interviews and lawsuits. She did not testify in Maxwell's trial, but her story influenced it without a doubt. Now, she claimed that Epstein and Maxwell trafficked her starting at age 17 to powerful men, including Prince Andrew, settled a lawsuit with him in 2022, and others like Bill Richardson, George Mitchell, who denied it. But she described being directed to have sex as part of their operation, and claimed that after she had sex with Prince Andrew, that she was basically interrogated by Epstein for all the details, and that it was clear that he was going to use this as blackmail. Sarah Ransom came out publicly. She was featured in Netflix Filthy Rich documentary, and had a book 2021 called Silence No More: Alleged Abuse in Interviews and Lawsuits. She described being trapped on Epstein Island and in New York City, forced into daily sexual abuse, and sent on errands to recruit young girls. She implied that the setup was for Epstein's powerful friends, though her direct exposure focused on Epstein, and she never, she never claimed to have had sex with anybody other than Epstein. She claimed to have overheard conversations about him doing this, as a means of blackmail. And Johanna Schoberg, she came out publicly via unsealed depositions in Giuffre's lawsuit against Maxwell, provided testimony about Epstein's operations. She alleged that she was recruited for massages that turned sexual. She witnessed and was aware of girls being paid to recruit others. She described encounters with powerful men like Prince Andrew, who allegedly groped her, and comments about Bill Clinton. She implied that she was part of the trafficking pool for Epstein's elite circle. And there are more. And, there's like 10 more that I have on a list that I could go down. This is stuff that came out of lawsuits, that came out of, under oath, came through depositions. I don't think these girls are making this up. Now,
well, they're not. And we did a little research ourselves, on this, and myself and the good Colonel, and we actually found the original transcript from the trial that Acosta presided over. And there's there's one entry in there that we caught, and I'll read it. It says basically, I quote, "Tragically, the record reveals that Epstein used children to find more victims. The record also shows that some of the children knew the type of people they could be exposed to, and the infamous nature of such, quote, notable, unquote, people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's from the
Now,
first trial. That's from the first
for
trial.
for those that don't know who Alexander Acosta is, he was the former U.S. attorney for the Southern Florida, who handled Epstein's 2008 plea deal, and he was later Trump's labor secretary, which is kind of interesting.
Yep.
You know, he's very highly credible as a witness because he was a direct participant in Epstein's case. Now, something else that he was quoted from, and you know, this is the problem when you have to go testify before Congress and all of that.
Mhm.
So it was reported during his Trump transition interview that he had to explain why he backed off of tougher prosecution of Epstein.
Yep.
And he's quoted as saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone."
Yep.
That's coming from the prosecutor.
Yep.
I don't know, you know, like, are you going to tell me all of these girls are lying, that the former prosecutor and his former labor secretary are lying? It's bullcrap.
Yeah, that's
I'm calling
actually
bullshit.
yeah, that was actually reported by a reporter named Ward in the Observer, and the exact quote is, Ward writes, he cut the non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorney because he had been told to back off, that Epstein was above his pay grade. I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. He told his interviewers in the Trump transition, who evidently thought that was a sufficient answer, and went ahead and hired Acosta anyway. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Now there's
So,
another interesting character named Ari Ben Manash. I don't know if I'm saying that properly or not, but he's a former Israeli intelligence officer. He was a Mossad arms dealer in the 1980s, self-proclaimed ex-spy with books on intel ops. Now, you know, it's a mixed bag. I'd say most of the people believe that he's credible due to verified past roles. He does have verified past roles, you know, as a arms dealer with the Mossad and that sort of thing.
mhm.
Some, though, call him an unreliable witness, but he said that Israel would deny it. Jeffrey Epstein was put straight with Israelis by Robert Maxwell at the time in military intelligence. This is where the theory of him being connected with the Mossad comes from, primarily is from this, you know, because Ghislaine Maxwell's father, you know, was a known Mossad agent. So, you know, there's others too.
What about the bar connection? Did you check out the bar connection? How Donald Barr, which is Bill Barr's father, did you know about that connection?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, so that's a very interesting one. Of course,
yeah,
the
headmaster for the Dalton School in New York.
Donald Barr hired Epstein with no background at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be a professor at this finance school, even though he had no background in that whatsoever.
Yeah,
and of course,
Dalton School. And did you look into Donald
CIA
Barr's
connection.
background? Donald Barr worked for the OSS. He was an OSS agent.
That's right.
Old school CIA agent. So, you know, and
Yep.
you have Bill, then you have, he's the father of Bill Barr. And then you have Donald Barr.
And Bill Barr was a CIA analyst as well.
Yep. And you have Donald Barr writing a book called Space Relations. It's a science fiction novel in which he depicts a young man hooking up with a woman, and it's on a foreign planet, and basically they engage in child rape.
Yep.
He actually wrote a book about it, you know. So,
and in fact, you know, there's and so I want to get into some of that as well, because for those that still think there's no way that kind of thing happens in this country, boy, there's a whole litany of history going back, you know, the last 50 years or more that say otherwise. So those are just some of the credible witnesses, I think, that speak to something happening. Now, what's interesting, and I don't believe, and I was curious about it because right around the same time, we hear Epstein didn't kill himself. Then we hear There is no list. We hear there was no blackmail. And guess who else gets acquitted? P. Diddy, for basically accusations of the same thing or same nature. Now, so I was curious, is there any connection between these guys? Now I looked, I cannot find any connection between them. I don't see anywhere where they met, or anything like that, but it's still interesting.
I see a connection. It's a
I
loose
see a
one.
connection in the behavior.
It's Bill. You got Bill Barr, who was the Attorney General, and he was working with James Comey, and you have Maureen
Comey's daughter. Yeah, was
Comey's
the one
daughter,
that,
prosecutor for P. Diddy and a prosecutor for Epstein.
Yep.
And
And that's a very good point. And in fact, she just got fired.
Yeah,
Okay,
and that's another thing too. Why was she fired? What was the reason for her termination?
Yep.
So
So there's some other things that are interesting too that I think kind of add to this story. When you look at, like, you go through and you dig into the FBI vault, okay, which is the reading room for declassified documents. I did a search, and I used AI to do a search and do some digging, and I said, hey, I want you to, is there strong evidence or legal cases in the past, maybe not as well publicized as Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's cases, of a human trafficking ring being sanctioned by a government in order to collect blackmail on powerful people? And then I said, search the FBI vault reading room as well as other sources, and it found some stuff. So one of the ones that was the top of the list is something called Operation Midnight Climax. This was between the 1950s and 1960s. It was under CIA or CIA under MK Ultra. This is declassified. You can go and find it. I've got the links to it. The CIA subproject where agents hired prostitutes to lure unsuspecting men, often powerful or influential, to safe houses in San Francisco and New York. Victims were dosed with LSD without consent, observed through two-way mirrors, and sometimes filmed, officially for studying drug effects on interrogation, mind control, but the setup screamed blackmail potential. And it was run by Sidney Gottlieb and George Hunter White. It was declassified in the 1970s by the Church Committee hearings, the congressional hearing. There's no disputing that. The evidence, prostitutes were essentially trafficked, employed by the government to facilitate non-consensual acts, hidden cameras, recorded encounters, enabling potential compromise on elites. Not a massive ring like Epstein's, but a systematic use of sex workers for exploitation. White's diaries hint at personal blackmail uses, though the CIA denies it. And, this evidence is strong. It's declassified CIA documents and congressional testimony that confirm the op. There's no direct legal case for blackmail, but it was sanctioned. And the Church Committee exposed it as unethical. It's less publicized due to MK Ultra's broader scandals overshadowing this sub-op. So that's important, folks, because look, this shows that there is a history, there is a precedent for this in American history. Interestingly enough, what the Church Committee uncovered in relation to this, if a Church Committee were done today, I think that they would uncover similar things in the abuses of Section 702 of FISA and of the surveillance systems, which they basically said, that was something else that they uncovered during the Church Committee, was the abuse of blackmail. Remember, you had J. Edgar Hoover that was collecting dirt on everyone in Washington. That was one of the things the Church Committee exposed. And, and it's funny because we're seeing the same stuff, just accelerated and on steroids because of the digital world that we live in today.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, it would be great if we could have something along those lines today, but the problem is you got to find a Frank Church first. I mean, that guy was a very unique individual
Yeah.
You know, he was unblackmailable. He was untouchable, and he basically uncovered a whole lot of stuff. I mean, you know, his arch enemy was Colby, the CIA director at the time.
Hmm.
But I mean, he was a good man, and there's a recent biography that was written about him called "The Last Honest Man." I highly recommend it. People read it if you really want to see the origins of how the intelligence community started to absolutely devolve. I think it's not disputed by anyone that Frank Church is the one that was the first one that was sounding the alarms on this. That you know, I believe there's a recording out there. I've seen it where he's basically testifying. Or he's either testifying or he's being interviewed, and he says that future technology will advance so much that
Yeah.
that it would result in an absolute police state where you could not escape surveillance. And
Yeah.
I think we're beginning to see that. You know, I mean, people thought that the Patriot Act was a great thing. Well, it's a great thing if the good guys are running it, but you know, eventually the good guys sometimes get replaced by the bad guys. And you know, there's one axiom of in all of this is that when immoral, unethical people get into positions of power like this, and they themselves can be blackmailed. In other words, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound. Almost invariably, they begin to create a system that perpetuates itself. And I
Yep.
think that's what we're seeing with the whole Epstein thing. He created an organization and a structure that's outlived him. He's been gone for 6 years,
Hmm.
and he's he's uh, still relevant. There's questions about
Absolutely.
what was his role. I mean,
Well,
you
there's
know, I don't
someone
know.
serving time, 20 years in prison,
Yeah,
for their role in all of that. And that brings up that other question is that if there's no there, then how in the heck was this person convicted of human trafficking? Was she just trafficking to one person? I doubt it. Talking thousands of girls for one guy? Come on.
yeah. And you're right. That's exactly what Pam Bondi says. Thousands and thousands of films and images. Well. I mean, is it all of Epstein? I doubt it. I mean, uh, and then let's talk about we did some additional research. Let's talk about they say that there is no list. There's no list. Well,
Mhm.
you know, in on the Justice Department website, um, in the first phase release of declassified Epstein files, there's a sub entry C and D, contact book redacted,
Yes.
masseuse list
Yep.
redacted. Now, who are these people? Who are these people?
Yeah.
Have they been investigated? I mean, there's there's
There's
questions.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that brings up a good point. So look, maybe a bunch of people went to his island and they didn't do anything.
Mhm.
Or maybe a bunch of people and I do think that there were people that went to his island probably didn't do anything. Either they didn't fall for the bait or they were there for some other reason. I think that's very possible.
I'll give you one more. Maybe they went there, they saw what was going on, and they said, "I'm getting the hell out of here." Well,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
those people need to step forward if
I
they're
agree.
out there. Yeah. You know?
Now, and I think the other I think another very good possibility is there is evidence. There have been there's at least one FBI whistleblower that I know of who came forward and spoke about, and that's Garrett O'Boyle, friend of mine, who has spoken about. I think that he had sources inside New York FBI field office that said that they were destroying evidence surrounding the Epstein files. And what corroborates that is you had Pam Bondi come out and say, "Oh yeah, it's all sitting on my desk," and then she kind of gets embarrassed when she finds out that what she showed or gave to all of these social media people was lists that have already been released. So she sends this like nasty gram letter to Cash Patel, kind of unfairly because he had just started, hadn't had a chance to really do anything. I think he'd only been
Well,
there maybe.
let me stop you for a second.
Yeah.
Who would she have gone to get that materials? That's the question right there.
Question.
And I bet you it was Maureen Coney. I mean,
Probably
I'm just
right.
expecting. I mean, because she
No,
would be the one.
you're probably right.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so that brings up a good point. Maybe that's why she was fired.
Yeah, I would
So,
think so.
so that is the other thing too, is that if they destroyed evidence and now you have this list, but you don't have any of the evidence backing up anything.
Yep.
Maybe you got tapes, but you don't know. Okay, let's face it, right?
Mhm.
And you were in intelligence, all right? If you saw a videotape of somebody, but you don't have the person in your custody to immediately test them for drugs, to question them, something that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and it's just a tape. You don't know anything. You don't know if that person was drugged. Like I just gave an example that happened before in our government where people were put under LSD and unbeknownst to them, sexual acts committed on them by prostitutes.
Mhm.
There's another, so it's possible that there are some, innocent people who got caught up in this. And if they were to expose them and they don't have evidence now, or they're missing pieces of evidence, it would be very difficult to make a case. And I do believe one thing I do believe that if the FBI is not going to charge somebody, I don't believe they should come forward with, supposed evidence. I think if you're going to do that and then not charge somebody, to me, that's tantamount to just destroying somebody's reputation for the sake of destroying their reputation. You should only bring forward that kind of evidence and expose it to the public if you are, in fact, planning on bringing charges.
Well, and when we worked in the business, you and I both know that if you did come across information, credible information,
Yeah.
and you didn't have all of the facts, basically it was a procedure, that you followed, which is basically called, it's a reportable incident.
Yeah.
Especially if they're serving in government, it's a reportable incident, and you report it and say, hey, I've come across this information, don't know what it means. You guys are the professionals, and then that's when the clandestine services takes over, the agents take over, and they take it and run with it. But
Yeah.
you know, um, uh, if evidence was destroyed, then they need to just come forward and say it. They
I
need
agree.
they need to the best medicine to all of this is sunlight. I
I
mean,
agree.
it's the best disinfectant, and they need to just tell the American people. The American people are very forgiving people. We are, but one thing that is just abhorrent is being called names, being called a conspiracy theorist, and expecting a completely implausible uh, uh, argument that you're positing that goes directly against everything that you've been saying for the last 6-7 years. You've been campaigning on it. It
Yeah.
just doesn't fit.
Well, that's another, interesting take on this is that these guys, I've heard some people make a comment. I think actually very great advice, which is that this really needs a special prosecutor. There's no way, this it's such a scandal and it is such a big deal and it does matter to the American people.
I got
That
some breaking news for you here from Trump.
What's that?
I got some breaking news from Trump on this. He said he just sent this out. Based on the ridiculous amount of publicity given to Jeffrey Epstein, I have asked Attorney General Pam Bondi to produce any and all pertinent grand jury testimony subject to court approval. This scam perpetrated by the Democrats should end right now. Well,
Okay. Well, then,
okay.
bring them out and then we'll see.
Yeah. And now here's the next question. Are those judges or whoever that's got this pertinent information sealed? Are they going to comply? Are they going to unseal these records?
Let me give you my best
Yeah.
prediction on that. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think this is a shell game. This is
and that was
we're
Carolyn Levitt this morning. She did a dodge on that this morning when she was asked a question.
Smart move by Trump, to be honest with you. Should have done that like weeks ago, because if you don't want something to come out, shift it into somebody else's court that is never going to release it.
Yeah.
And then it's not my problem anymore. Separation of powers. I can't force a judge to do it because of separation of powers. And then he can blame the judge all day long. And the judge doesn't give a crap because he's elected for life or appointed for life.
Yeah, it's basically that old saying in the military: issue passed, issue complete.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Oh man,
Issue passed, issue complete.
yeah. I
So,
want to touch on a couple of other interesting cases in history
mhm.
that sound awfully familiar. You know, like sounds very similar to. Have you ever heard of or are you familiar with the Franklin child prostitution ring?
No.
Okay, so this was another one that was buried, and I had to go digging for it.
Mhm.
These were allegations made in the 1980s in Omaha, Nebraska. There are claims of child sex trafficking network that was tied to Lawrence King, who's the Franklin Credit Union head. All right, and he was basically this involved GOP elites. Remember Denny Hastert, I think, was one that
Oh, yeah.
got caught up having gay sex with a page or something like that.
Mhm. Yep.
I don't know if he's directly involved with this one, but it was kind of like that same type of thing. Here, according to this, it includes abuse at parties for blackmail, alleged CIA, FBI cover-up to protect powerful figures, for example, politicians and businessmen, and victims like Paul Bonacci testified to being trafficked nationwide. Kids were reportedly groomed and pimped to high-profile men for sex, with photos, videos for compromise. Some allege government sanctioned via intelligence ops to control influencers, and grand juries labeled it a hoax, but persistent claims of witness intimidation came out. And it's interesting. There was in that case, the federal grand juries dismissed the core allegations as fabrications, and there were recantations, from testimony and stuff like that. Now, King was convicted, but he was only convicted on financial fraud. Interestingly enough,
Hmm.
there was a book that came out called The Franklin Cover-Up, and victims' lawsuits provided evidence, but the courts rejected that evidence, so they just wouldn't even look at it. So there were lawsuits directly at him, at this guy Franklin, and but they just didn't care to look at that evidence. And there was there
Either that
were
or somebody made them an offer they couldn't refuse.
yeah. Now, and then on top of that, and this one I know you'll be familiar with, is the Stasi honey trap operations from the 1950s and 1980s. The Russians were known for stuff, where the word compromat comes from.
Yep.
And in fact, you and me, and we both went through this when we had clearances. We would get all the time, every year, we would have OPSEC training,
Yep.
basically warning us about who we even allow on our Facebook page. Some beautiful woman all of a sudden wants to be your friend, and I remember getting all of that training every year annually.
Sure.
And so, but a
Well,
lot of people
like in
aren't
I mean,
familiar with
they were
that.
doing that. Stasi was doing that in West Germany when I was stationed at Ramstein.
Yeah.
They were doing that in West Germany, and basically, we were told, uh, you know, even if someone comes up to you, a pretty lady or somebody comes up to you with a piece of paper, and you're at a
Yeah.
bar or you're at a table or something like that, you don't pick up the piece of paper, because you can bet your bottom dollar you're being photographed. And
Yeah.
next thing you know, they're going to test you out. They're going to come to you and they're going to say, "Look, we have photos of you with a known KGB agent or a Stasi agent."
Yep.
I mean, a lot of guys went down because of, they got a phone call and from someone, "Hey, can you bring me a phone book from the installation?" And they did it, and they didn't realize they were, they were being photographed. And next thing you know, they're being blackmailed.
Yep.
They've been compromised.
And it's not just relegated here to the United States. There was a big case in the 1990s called the Marc Dutroux affair that was in Belgium. In there, you had Regina Louf, who provided sworn testimony during investigations and in court, claiming that she was trafficked as a child to elite parties for abuse, rape, and witnessing murders. Other survivors like Sabrina Dardine and Letitia Delhaize, testified at Dutroux' 2004 trial about abduction and rape and implications of a wider network. Now, what's interesting is Dutroux was convicted in 2004 for kidnapping, rape, and murder of girls. So these girls, like this is basically in fact, it's been dubbed Belgium's Epstein for, because of its similarities to, in terms of the size of the trafficking ring.
Yeah.
So this stuff has been going on and has been, and there have been cases around the world that this has been confirmed, that these kinds of things exist. You also had in the UK, independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, Westminster and related strands in the UK, where you had, and that was going from the 1970s to 2010s.
Yeah.
And then the inquiry was in 2015 to 2022. But there, the inquiry heard from 7,000 plus survivors exposing institutional failures, some claiming that, for example, like Operation Midland Carl Beach led to perjury convictions, but this independent inquiry confirmed widespread abuse and cover-ups. Interestingly, there was not a single, there was no mass elite prosecutions. Reforms were recommended, and similar to Epstein, in elites, they basically just denied it and silenced victims.
Yeah, that seems to be the modus operandi. I mean,
Australia. Yep.
Yeah, it's basically, I mean, what we're describing, for your listening audience, what we're describing in the intelligence community, they call it a honeypot operation, is what it's called.
Yeah.
And it's been used for centuries. I mean,
Yeah.
sex has been used for centuries, for clandestine operations. But at the magnitude of what we're discussing here, and as it pertains to how the administration is conducting themselves, like the attack like the other day. I mean, the attacks by Trump. I mean, I looked at that, and then I happened to be tuning on the radio on that same day, and I heard Mark Levin calling anybody, basically was calling us all reprobates. Anybody that even questions.
Yep. I listened to that little 15-minute blurb that he gave, and I found it despicable.
Yeah, and I get it. I get it. He's Jewish. He's for the Jewish state. He's for Israel. I think the Jewish people are great. They and they have a special place in history. But the bottom line is if, and this is a big if Mossad, the IDF, military intelligence of Israel, were running a clandestine operation on our soil and we're compromising our citizens, then I have a right to know. You have a right to know.
Absolutely.
We need to know. We need to know the truth about what happened, and let the chips fall where they may.
Let the chips fall where they may. Look, if we find out that there are people in power today in some of these, Five Eyes countries or Israel and others that are allies with us, if we find out that they were involved in these types of operations, those leaders have got to go, as far as I'm concerned, and the people can vote them out. At the end of the day, if it's bad enough that our own government gets involved in these kinds of things, and there's history going back that proves that.
Yes.
But when our allies are involved in it too, you're right. The American people have a right to know, and the problem is, this is to me what happens when people are leading on the basis of human wisdom instead of righteous wisdom or godly wisdom.
Yeah.
Because they're always going to, make decisions that are going to be, based on what they think is the best decision that they can make, but it's not necessarily the right decision. It takes faith to do the difficult and righteous thing.
wisdom and discernment, and basically, the scripture basically says, "Put not your faith and trust in man." Man,
That's right.
man let you down every time. So you've got, like, when we started the show, you're talking about a lot of people that are like ultra diehard, super MAGA. I don't care what Trump does. I will jump
Yeah,
off the cliff with him. Well, I'm sorry, that's not me.
me neither.
So I was very disappointed with the way he's conducted himself over the last week and a half. But
It's interesting because it's
it's a
very
tell.
similar. It's very similar to how he has behaved in regards to claims that have been made by people and questions that have been asked of Trump in regards to the mRNA vaccines.
Yeah.
Trump has never been willing to admit that there was any harm done to anybody by those vaccines.
Yeah.
And yet there's ample evidence.
Oh yeah. Well,
So, and look, he may not have required the mandate,
Mhm.
but he approved the fast tracking of these without proper study. And
Oh, yeah.
that's on him. If you're going to
And
be the
and
president of the United States, you're going to make tough decisions. You have to own those decisions.
sure, I mean, I mean, but this nonsense of with experimentation, and it's largely started in the military. I mean, you can go back 25 years to the anthrax
Yeah,
vaccine.
I was a victim of that.
Yeah,
I had to take all 8 series of those shots, and I was told
yeah.
that I would be kicked out of the military
Mhm.
with a dishonorable discharge if I refused. Because I was like, when they told me I had to take this shot and that it was experimental, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. How can you make me take something that's experimental? I didn't sign up to the army to be a guinea pig.
Yeah,
And I said, and it was about, for me, it was about the issue of informed consent.
yeah,
But I had no choice if I wanted to not basically be labeled a felon, with a dishonorable discharge. And so I took it. And what's interesting is that a lot of guys that took it, nothing happened. But there was a number of guys that, and myself included, that
yeah.
developed, I developed diabetes at age 30 in the best
Wow.
health of my life. And, and there are claims by many other people who claim that after receiving all of these vaccines, and it may have been a combination of just not just that vaccine and its 8 booster shots, but it may have been all of those vaccines that I got every time I got shipped overseas or whatever, that in combination caused some autoimmune attack on my pancreas.
Yeah, I got the fourth anthrax shot, and I got on a ship. I was on a surveillance ship off the Gulf of Aden, and developed anaphylaxis. And I
Yep.
mean, the nearest port that I could have got to was Djibouti. So it was basically, they just shot me up with Benadryl and said, "Hope you make it."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I mean, we could talk about mRNA. I mean, I think that, in all fairness, I think RFK Jr. is on the right track.
I think so too.
I've been watching a lot of traffic. He's basically pushing. He wants to do a comprehensive study of the vaccinated against the unvaccinated, and I think there's some talk about using the Amish community as the unvaccinated.
Absolutely.
And let's again, this is another case of, yes, he was the one that developed Operation Warp Speed. He was the president at the time. But I mean, just be honest with the American people. If you didn't know, obviously you're not a medical doctor. And Fauci and Birx and the rest of these clowns, these Mengele types, if they fooled you, just come right out and tell the American people. Just
Yep.
come out and tell the American people, and then let the chips fall where they may. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies need to have their exemptions to lawsuits lifted.
Yeah.
So
Now, and I blame, honestly, Congress is just as guilty for this, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that passed the laws that allowed that kind of thing to happen. That
yeah,
allowed drug companies to be able to produce vaccines
mhm,
and not have any liability whatsoever.
yeah,
Is like the perfect storm. A presidential emergency use authorization, and at the same time, drug companies don't have any liability if they kill people with their
yeah.
vaccines.
I'll go one more for you. I don't know if you're familiar with Commander Green. He's in the Navy right now, and
Yep.
he's got an admiral going after him right now, trying to ruin his career
Yep.
over the vaccine mandate. I thought this was over with.
Yeah.
But
No,
you
I know
got,
Commander Green personally. Yep.
yeah, you got
It's
branches
crazy
of the
what's being
military
done
that
to
are
them.
still haven't gotten the memo, and it begs the question, this,
Who's running the show?
who's running the show here, Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So I think, we're coming up on the hour here, and I want to kind of round things off here. Here's the deal, folks. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask questions. It's not unreasonable to question your government. You absolutely have the right to, and you should. If there's something that doesn't smell right, ask questions. At the same time, I want to encourage people to not believe everything you read on the internet. Look, I've seen some crazy crap come out, and there's two things about that are dangerous. Number one, obviously, it completely destroys credibility when you've got these talking heads that come out with conspiracy theories that do not have any kind of evidence that they can back up what they're saying. And people that say that Donald Trump is on the list, like you had Elon Musk even say that, right?
Yep.
Well, if you actually believe that, if you have the evidence, bring it out. But if you don't have evidence, don't be saying stupid stuff like that. And that is something that it's okay to speculate and say, I wonder, but I'm talking about people that have come out and said that. And I've seen, what's interesting is I saw a show today where this guy was talking about that, and he was making claims like that, and he was referring to a news outlet that's based in another country. And I dug into it because I wanted to see who owns this and where's the origin. And I started digging, and everything was masked. And that gives me a lot of suspicion that that's our enemies pumping propaganda. They see this right now as a moment. And this is one of the reasons that kind of, to be honest with you, kind of pisses me off about all of this, because, I recognize that, united we stand, divided we fall. And the handling of this situation, I expect the Democrats to utilize anything they can as fodder, to try to divide and conquer with the Republican Party. I guess I expect that.
Yep.
But what I don't expect is a flippant attitude, towards those people that are questioning things. Now, if with the comments that Trump made about this is the Democrats making stuff up and all of that, if he wants to call out the Democrats for pushing fake propaganda, fake news, which there has been a lot of that, then be specific. But don't just generalize everything and call it all a hoax and all fake news, because there are legitimate questions. We just went through a litany of evidence that points to something there.
Yeah.
Now, if there's nothing there, then come out and explain why all of these witnesses, why Acosta, why all of the past, things that our CIA has been involved with, that other countries' intelligence communities have been involved. Explain to me how that cannot happen today.
Yeah, all we are doing is quoting their own words and facts that we've heard. For example, case in point, Jeffrey Epstein himself said he was a foreign agent. In fact, when they went into his safe, they found a passport that had been expired from the 1980s. It was his photo. It was a legitimate passport, but it said his home of record is Saudi Arabia and a totally different name. I mean, he's on the record.
That's very interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, this
the
stuff
Saudis have been, that. So let's think about that for a minute.
Okay.
Because this leads. So I didn't know that. I didn't know that fact. I hadn't heard that one, and that's important, because here's the thing. My contention has been all along that sure, there's probably some Republicans and Democrats that are caught up in this, maybe even in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the more likely, the reason there's this push to shut all this down is that there are foreign leaders who are part of our allies, who are part of the, that basically Trump is trying to negotiate with right now, that are on this list. Maybe people in Saudi Arabia, maybe people in Israel, maybe people in the UK, maybe people in our NATO allies. I mean, look, Trump just got NATO to commit to 5%. If he comes out and says half of you all are on the list, here's a question. How is Trump getting all these people to cooperate with him? Maybe
Yeah.
he's saying, hey, look, I make this go away, you cooperate with me.
Let me make you an offer you can't refuse.
Yes. And here's the deal. And I want people to honestly ask themselves this. Because this is where it gets like into that gray area, right? And I understand. This is where I have a little bit of grace for Trump. If Trump is honestly trying to save our country, and he's trying to prevent us from getting into World War III, and he's trying to stop the just meaningless murder of hundreds of thousands of lives, in between Russia and Ukraine, and between Israel and in Gaza and Iran. Let's just say a hypothetical here that he's working on deals, trying to make things happen, trying to save us economically, because you got all of these countries that are trying to destroy our US dollar, through the BRICS nations, right? And people don't realize this, the just major problem that we are facing regarding that. But if what he is working on is, if what he has to do is basically ignore the sins of the past that, quite honestly, were probably brought on and and enabled by our own intelligence agencies, or by a cooperation deal with Mossad and CIA. This is all speculative. And he can save our country, can save the world from entering into World War III by making this go away. Then I have to agree that it's probably better to make it go away. And so there are some circumstances that I do see in the best interest of the United States to just shut all this down. But man, could it be handled a lot better than the way that it's being handled? And one of those ways.
You think Pam Bondi is going to last? I've talked to a lot of people, and you know what they've said? She's not a killer. And that's what Trump likes. He likes killers. She's not a killer.
Did you ever see, I saw a funny meme that actually I thought was like hilarious, and it's probably a little bit unfair to Pam Bondi, but do you remember there was, I think it was like Miss America or, Miss Universe or something. And there was this young blonde girl that was asked about, if she could, accomplish one thing, what would she do? And she said world peace. And she, and she starts talking about, Iraq and she's like, oh, in Iraq or Iraq and stuff and such. And she didn't know what the hell she was talking about. And it was obvious, right? And somebody had a picture of her, and it had a picture of Pam Bondi. Goes, oh, I now I recognize where I've seen her before. And that was so hilarious, because when she talks, she gets up there and she really does come across as somebody who's just not aware of what's going on. And the biggest example of that was when she got up there and talked about, oh, I've got all of this on my desk. And clearly she hadn't looked at any of it. And the fact that she gave that out to people tells you that she didn't know anything about what had already been released. Like, she wasn't aware of the subject. And anybody that's going to be in that position needs to have a beat on what is going on in the world, what is going on in the US. They need to understand what's going on culturally. And she clearly had no knowledge or understanding of any of that.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, it begs the question, Maureen Comey getting fired. I mean, if Pam Bondi right out of the chute said, give me everything you got on Epstein, and Maureen Comey goes, here you go.
Yeah, and the fact that she would take that on her word, I mean, come on.
I know.
So that tells me right there. Yeah, and I saw, like, my personal belief is that she should be fired. She should be asked to resign, and she should go and be replaced, with somebody that is more of a professional, that is not going to allow themselves to make those kinds of mistakes, because those kinds of mistakes, are dangerous ones. Now, at the same time, you know, I look at like Cash and I look at Ann Bongino. I don't know why in the world they would come out and say, "Oh, we went and we looked at all the evidence, and it's clear that Epstein, you know, killed himself." First of all, why even do that? You don't need to. Nobody cares what their opinion is because we don't believe it. so it's like, you know, dude, why are you going to fall on your sword over that? You should just not comment on it. Just say, you know, look, we looked at the evidence, but there's a lot of stuff missing, and you know, this was already looked into. We don't really have anything new that we can add to it. There's a lot of suspicious stuff, and just leave it at that. You know,
They could do that. They could do that, Nate. But the problem is they boxed themselves into a corner.
They did
because they campaigned on this for years.
Well, and so that begs the question: is are they fit for that role? Now, the thing is I do think they're doing a lot of good at the FBI. I mean, look, you got the FBI actually going after bad guys now.
Yep.
But here is the big problem, and this is what I brought up in a podcast I did a couple days ago. For all the good that has happened in the DOJ and the FBI, the one thing we don't see happening, we don't see any prosecutions of anybody who's politically connected. We don't see any prosecutions of anybody who is elite, and we don't see any prosecution of anybody who is either in or of the FBI or DOJ who absolutely committed felonies. We don't see them being prosecuted. And I'll give you one perfect example of that. You had a federal judge that exposed that over 258,000 illegal uses of Section 702 of FISA was used to spy on American citizens, mostly related to January 6th. These are violating their constitutional rights. That's deprivation of law, or sorry, deprivation of what is it?
Deprivation of rights under color of law.
Rights. That's it. Thank you. Rights under color of law. It is a felony, and yet no one, not a single. You're going to tell me not one FBI agent's going to go to jail for that? When I was at NSA, I was read onto that program, and I was told clearly 10 years in prison for every incident where you use this to spy on Americans.
Yeah.
In fact, it was so clear that if we unmasked something and it was an American citizen, we had to delete it. We couldn't remask it. No, it had to be deleted because it was not, at that point, you had evidence that it was not collected properly within the Constitution. So the whole fact that nobody has been prosecuted for that tells me that the FBI, the DOJ are incapable of investigating their own. They're incapable of prosecuting their own. And it seems at least apparent in regards to this whole Epstein thing that they're incapable of prosecuting people who are politically connected or who are elite.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I mean, people could argue that, maybe statute of limitations have run. Okay.
Well, that's the beauty of this. So there's I've looked into this because obviously, as a whistleblower myself, the evidence that I brought forward on Hillary Clinton and the FBI's cover up that there was, it's questionable as to whether you could ever bring anything now. Like, I don't think there'll ever be justice there because money laundering has there is a pretty much all the crimes that she's accused of. There's a statute.
I had a very good conversation or exchange with Wendy Mahoney. I don't know if you're familiar. Wendy S. Mahoney. She's an author. She's a reporter, and she says that they could still be nailed under conspiracy charges.
Maybe. I think the conspiracy has to add in, like treason or something like that. But there's some other things though. There are some things though that can be. So there's a list of crimes. So capital crimes, murder, obviously, no statute of limitation.
Yep.
There's no statute of limitation on sex crimes with minors either, which is interesting. There is no statute of limitation on treason, but treason. Everybody wants to say, "Oh, this person committed treason," but treason is very specific. Yeah. It has to have basically been during time of war or during some conflict with the foreign adversary, and it's something that is not as
something clear and definitive. Like they have you on tape taking the oath, swearing an oath to the CCP and passing.
Exactly. It's not as simple. Yeah, what we generally loosely call treason is not treason by the legal definition, and so it's hard to prosecute somebody on that when you're not in a time of war, basically. But you could get these people at any time for sex with minors. But again, then the problem becomes the further away from the incident you get, the harder it is to prove your case because you don't have evidence. The person can claim that they were drugged. You don't have a blood test that you can test to find out if that's true. There's all sorts of things that that could be claimed, and it becomes really hard. And then when witnesses start dying, like Virginia Guffrey, who supposedly killed herself, even though her father says there's no way. And even though she said, if I end up dead, she said, if I end up dead, I did not kill myself.
Yeah, she made a recording of herself saying as much that I didn't.
So when that happens, it becomes really hard to prosecute. So I think we're looking at a case where I don't know that there'll be justice. The best that I can hope for is that the systemic problems that led to this, that allowed this to happen, that those things get done away with. But the only way that happens is if there's another church commission, and if you get a bipartisan, which I don't think could happen in the current political atmosphere, but you would need bipartisan support, both Republicans and Democrats, to say, hey, we're going to clean this out so that and they would be smart to come together on this, because at the end of the day, it serves no one for members of Congress to be blackmailed.
Put everybody that's involved in the intelligence community, I would say secret collateral or higher, put them all on lifestyle polygraphs, random, just let the intelligence community know there will be, just like there's unannounced impromptu urinalysis tests. We're going to do impromptu, unannounced, or command directed full scope polygraphs, and and then offer amnesty. If you've done something, come clean now. They need to come up with some way to clean out the entire intelligence community of all of these deep staters that are in there, that are operating under ideology as opposed to the oath to the Constitution.
Yeah, and I really do think that there's no reason for the FBI to have access to tools that are designed to, basically spy on our enemies abroad. They should not have. They're a domestic agency that needs to be separated.
You're talking about the counterintelligence division of the FBI.
Yeah, get rid of it.
That's always been a pain in the ass. Going back to what was his name, Hansen.
Yep. That guy was this Russian spy.
Yeah. Wore his uniform even.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Jack, I want to thank you for being on here with. I think this was a good discussion. Look, folks, there's so much propaganda out there. Be careful. Like I said, there's been just a massive amount of anti-Semitism. And a lot of that is propaganda coming from Hamas, coming from Iran. There is a lot of propaganda that's being pushed by our enemies right now. That is exasperating this whole Epstein thing. And the Democrats are they are jumping on it, and Trump, quite honestly, hasn't been really helping himself. He kind of sticks his foot in his mouth, sometimes, or maybe his keyboard in his mouth when he's on there tweeting about some of this stuff. At the end, I understand his frustration. He's trying to actually get things done that really do make a difference for the long haul for our country. But at the same time, I think the American people are done and tired of being lied to. We're done and tired of the lack of transparency, and we expect better of Trump. We hired him to be our president because we wanted somebody who was going to make America great again. And making America great again includes making America transparent, because we are a representative democracy. We do not want, we're a democratic republic, whatever you want to call it. The fact is we get to vote for our leaders. They are not appointed as kings, and we expect, our government who work for us to not lie to us.
Absolutely. I mean, you're spot on. I mean, every one of us, that call ourselves the movement or influence or whatever you want to call us, we were right there with Trump, shoulder to shoulder in the trenches while he was going through everything that he was going through. And a lot of people worked very hard for the last 4 years to get him back into the White House. And so it is not an unreasonable expectation for the people to have accountability from their government. That's all people want. They want a representative government that is of, by, and for the people. I didn't say that. Abraham Lincoln did.
That's right. And if what Trump is saying is true, and and we're all misinterpreting things, or we've all missed the mark on this, and there is it is a hoax, and there is no, then come out and explain to us the dozens of testimonies and how they are not accurate. Explain to us about Acosta's statements. Explain to us about the history of this sort of thing with America's intelligence community, particularly the CIA, and explain to us all of that so that we can say, okay, all right, you made a reasonable case, and we can accept that.
Agree 100%.
So, Jack, I'm going to go ahead and close this out in prayer, as I usually do. Look, we have these great discussions, but I also recognize that we need God's help in this. And Trump needs God's help in this. I think, if we want to survive this, as the American people, as we want to survive this as, as as conservatives, we need God's help, because right now we're being tested, no doubt about it. Heavenly Father, I just thank you, God, for Jack, Lord. I thank you for others, Lord, who are speaking truth and who are doing it in a way that is responsible. I pray, God, that you would help voices of reason to come to the surface. And I pray that you would surround Trump with people who will advise him correctly. And I pray, God, that you would help him to not act in accordance with his flesh, not act in accordance with man's wisdom, that he would seek counsel with you, Lord, about how he should handle these sensitive situations. Lord, I do pray that you would protect our nation, that you would protect the alliances that are being made, and that and that you would ultimately, Lord, allow there to be peace in the world, and that you would prevent and stop some of these wars that are going on. Lord, I also pray, Lord, that you would stop these dark operations that have been conducted to entrap people so that they can be blackmailed and manipulated. Lord, I pray anybody being manipulated and blackmailed in Congress, that they would resign and remove themselves from their positions of authority so that they cannot be manipulated. And if they're not going to do that, then I do pray that you would expose them so that we know that the people we're voting for are actually representing us, not the interests of some deep state or shadow government. Lord, I pray for wisdom for Trump, and I pray that he would listen to that wisdom. I pray that you would guide and direct him, and that you would protect our country through all of this as these things come to light. Lord, you're the one who says in your word that everything sown in darkness will be revealed. Eventually, it's all going to come out. And I pray, God, that you would please lead us through this valley right now, this valley of darkness, and lead us out of it into the light. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, Jack, thank you so much. God bless you. And folks, all thank you for joining and for listening. And we pray for you as well, and we ask that you pray for us. With that, have a good night. God bless.
Amen. God bless.
Raise some Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night. We'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change. The time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.